What's happening, everybody? Welcome back Behind the Spacebar. This is the podcast that helps you become a world-class playback engineer. Thanks so much for joining me. We've got a couple special episodes coming your way. This is part 2 of kind of a rapid-fire Instagram question episode. I am in the middle of a 3-show little summer tour. We're on our final show. I got a couple hours till I need to get going and start setting my stuff up. So what I thought I would do in the meantime is just record a quick little solo episode here, answering some questions that you guys submitted to me on Instagram. We got some great questions. You can check out part 1. We'll link it up in the show notes here so that you can find that. But this is part 2. We may end up doing a part 3. We'll see how far I can get through this. And then we'll go from there. So first off, if you have a question you want to have me answer in a future episode, then you can head to Instagram, search for From Studio to Stage IG. We'll put the info down below. You can find us, send us a direct message with your question, and I'll answer that on a future episode. All right, let's dive in and let's get going. First question, which I think this is great. My buddy Alex Jacques, Papa Jacques on Instagram, if you guys want to follow him. Simply, his question was Dante, which I think was great. If you're unfamiliar, Dante is a audio over networking protocol. I know that's not a question, but I'm still going to talk about it for a minute. It's an audio over network protocol that allows you to send multiple track count of audio all over one Ethernet cable. So the way a lot of us get started into this world is using something called DVS, Dante Virtual Sound Card, opening it up on our computer and routing audio from Ableton, just like we're going to an interface to a soundboard. In fact, that's the way that I'm using audio on this tour, is using Dante Virtual Sound Card. Now, you'll get into Dante for a little bit, and then you'll discover, yes, just plugging an Ethernet cable in is great, and I don't have to have an audio interface. But what happens if my computer goes down? I need redundancy. At this point, the folks, the YouTube Reddit commenters will say, yeah, but Will, don't you understand that that Dante network inherently is redundant if it's set up properly? In which I'll say, yeah, I feel fully aware of that. Thank you, John, for that comment. But we're not talking about the Dante system itself. We're talking about the playback portion of that, which requires 2 machines, essentially 2 audio interfaces, 2 instances of DVS in this case, and a way to switch those. So when you start to get into redundancy, I think the most affordable way to do that right now is the Xbox MD by DirectOut. And then they've got 2 kind of big sisters to the Xbox MD called the Prodigy MC, which converts audio, Prodigy MP, which converts and processes audio. Now, when you get into those categories, it's pretty expensive because you have to buy the chassis, then you buy the cards and the conversion. But it's a fantastic solution to keep your audio all digital, your playback all digital, high track count. But it can start to get expensive, particularly if you're running higher sample rates. You need 98K for audio playback. You've got to get into like the Prodigy line of stuff. But it's great. Now, what's interesting though, couple things, final thoughts here. One, a lot of folks that are using Dante aren't really using Dante on the road. What they're doing is they're creating these high track count interfaces, and then they're getting cards that are analog cards, or buying other interfaces, Ferrofish, to convert that Dante back to analog so they can have analog outputs. I think if you're going to do that, my personal opinion is it's probably easier. It's certainly much more affordable to just buy a couple Play Audio 1Us, create an aggregate audio device, and just roll with it, right? Now, if you're going to keep all that Dante, that's great. I'm a fan of that. The show I'm on now, we have a Prodigy MC, and I'm going DVS to that, and then they're taking MADI out of that into their console. So we're still staying all digital. We're not staying just Dante, but that's worked well for us. It's worked really well. Second thought is you still need MIDI redundancy. Very few pro-level rigs that I see actually have MIDI redundancy. If they're sending MIDI out to controls on stage, to multiple keyboards, drum pads, they're just duplicating that signal and sending it twice, from A and B machine, or they're just sending it from A and they haven't factored into B. The only thing that does that, Play Audio 1U from iConnectivity. So I'm still going to have one of those in my rig. In fact, this show that I'm on now, once we get through the summer, I think we have 16 fall shows that we're doing, 2 separate tours. and everyone in the band's ready for those program changes. So Play Audio One Use coming in the rig, and we're getting our program changes going. Final thing, this is going to be an exciting year for Dante. I know of a couple different companies releasing Dante interfaces. A few of those I think are going to be great solutions. One of those that's going to be released soon, I'm not a huge fan of. I don't think it's going to do well, but some fun stuff coming, which is great. So Alex, thanks for a great statement that I turned into a 5-minute answer to a non-question. Only I could do that. But good to see you, buddy. Next one, this is from Sebastian. Sebastian said, is it better to mute tracks and click instead of stop so timecode stays running? Sebastian, good question. Now, I would change your question slightly, because if you're going to mute tracks and click, you might as well just press stop. And depending on what you're controlling with timecode, most timecode things that chase timecode have something called freewheel, or I think it may also be called free sync. But if you kill timecode, basically they're going to keep running on like an internal timecode. And then once it receives the input again, it will sync back up. So you want to test this in your specific scenario. But typically if you press stop, that timecode stuff's going to keep running. And, so I think between muting tracks and click or stopping, I would just stop. Now, I want to tweak this question slightly though, because Sebastian, if you had answered, is it better to mute tracks and keep click going instead of stopping so that you can get back on? What would you do there? For me, the only time I press stop in our show is if something goes wrong. Now, my set automatically stops at the end of most songs. We have a couple medleys, a couple songs that flow automatically into each other. But if something happens, if the band gets off click, or if the band turns the click around, like they're still on click, but they miss an intro, someone misses a section, we repeat a section, something like that, I never press stop unless it's just an absolute catastrophe. And we have not had that happen yet. But what I do is I solo click so that we can hear click, we keep click going. And then I do a couple things. I hit a button that changes my quantization mode to quarter note. And then I use my previous next locator buttons to jump us to the previous or next locator we're going to. And I do that on the band's beat 4. So that Ableton swaps with it. And then I change our quantization mode back. And then I unsolo our click and we go back. Now in that scenario, there's going to be a brief moment of like everything's a little off or timecode isn't perfectly synced up just right. But then once I jump us, there may be a little glitch, but it's better than the whole show going down, right? So Sebastian, I personally never hit stop. And the big reason I never hit stop if the band gets off, again, if it's a catastrophe and everyone's looking and not sure what to do, maybe I'll get on the talk back and I would communicate, you want me to kill it? Maybe we restart it. I think there was one time in our, we did 30 shows at the beginning of this year. There was one time where I started a song and then the artist wanted to stop and I think it was like saying happy birthday to an audience member or something. So certainly I hit stop there. I'm not going to keep click running. And then we just restarted, right? Which was great. And it was still like within the intro. There wasn't track heavy or anything. So it wasn't awkward. But I know a lot of people that if something goes wrong, their tendency is just to hit stop. And I'm not a fan of stop and try to, select a section, hit play to sync back up with the band. Because of latency, if you don't have good timing, that could be difficult to do. I have done that in rehearsals. I do that quite often. If we go somewhere else or something happens, I need to sync back up or I stop and they keep going in rehearsal, I'll do that. But generally live, I just solo click and get us back on, which is great. But great question, Sebastian. Another question from Sebastian. Sebastian's hacking the system. I didn't specify just one question, but Sebastian's like, let me get a couple in there, but good question. This is another one. Is the Radial BackTrack just a backup and playback rigs? Is it auto switched if the main fails? Sebastian, good question. So what Sebastian is talking about, let's see if we can pull this up, is a little thing called the Radial BackTrack. Now, this looks, let's see if I can open a tab here. This, if you're unfamiliar with this, Radial makes some great stuff, certainly. But the Radial BackTrack is kind of like a small version of the SW8, which they've had for years and years and years. But what the Radial BackTrack is it's 2 inputs, right? Left, right. And then 1 set of outputs, XLR. You also get monitor as well too. But 2 sets of inputs. Sebastian, the main reason people use this in rigs, or at least the way I've used it and the way that I know most people use it, is for switching their tuning rig. So they have two outputs from their tuning rigs, typically a UA Apollo setup, and they set, mic 1 into input A, mic 1 backup into input B, mic 2, 1, mic 2, 2. Hopefully that makes sense. And plug that in, and then they manually switch that using the JR2 foot switch or on the front panel. Which is great. So the backtrack, if you were doing just a stereo backing track setup, you could certainly use it for that. But the reason that you see that in a lot of rigs is for switching of auto-tune systems. And the reason they do this is UAD, we can process, all of our processing is on the hardware. And so when we do auto-tune, something like that, it's super low latency. It's basically real-time tuning. And then we go out of there. We want to keep the conversion analog, right? What you don't want to do is go in, do your processing on the hardware, then route that back through your computer out of a interface and do the multiple conversion thing. You just want to go out of that into the radial, because the backtrack is just a analog switcher, which is great. So Sebastian, that's a really, really fantastic question. Great question for sure. I think we've got time for one more question. This is from Thomas. And then I think we got to do a part 3, and then we'll be through our solo questions here. Thomas said, best way to save CPU on an Ableton Live multi-VST synth system. Great question, Thomas. Best way to save CPU, first thing I can think of is understanding that if you put all of your VSTs on one track, like on one MIDI track, Live can only use one core per track. So for processing, for example, it's better to split those sounds up. So what I've done for a really long time, and what I've been teaching pretty consistently for a really long time with key stuff, is I like to separate my sounds by type. So basses are one track, pianos are in one track, pads are in one track, rhythmic synth ARP is in one track, as opposed to one instrument rack that handles everything. So that's number one. Number two is I try to use instrument racks so that I can do good management of my CPU. If you just turn off a track, it's going to continue to process CPU. If you turn off a device, it'll stop processing CPU. That can be really tricky, particularly with pads, because if I turn off a device and I re-trigger it with the device off and I turn the device on, I don't suddenly hear the pad, right? So the way around that is to use an instrument rack in Ableton. And you can search, I've got tons of content for free on YouTube talking about how to use instrument racks for keys. But those are the probably two things I would really suggest. Third thing, and this ties into episode 1, is Thomas, something I would do is not run your VSTs and soft synths on your playback machine. Keep that separate from your playback machine. Dedicate a machine just to soft synths and virtual instruments. You're going to have a way better experience in the end. Great questions. Great questions from Alex, from Sebastian, from Thomas on this episode. If you have any questions you want me to answer on our next episodes, then head to Instagram from Studio to Stage IG. We'll put the link in the description in the show notes. And you can submit a DM us a question, and I'll answer it on a future episode. Final thing, just as a gift to you, if you want to become a world-class playback engineer, maybe take your first step. Maybe you've been doing this for a while, but you feel like you're missing something. You want the confidence you're doing it correctly, or you want to just go beyond just a couple tutorials on YouTube or things that you have kind of taken in, and you're piecing things together, and you want an actual process. I want to encourage you to head to fromstudiotostage.com/template. When you're there, you can download my free playback template. Plus, you're going to get access to my entire backline gear database of gear that I suggest, that I use, that actually works. And you're going to get access to 2 courses. And those 2 courses are going to teach you why you should use playback, how to convince your band to use playback, what you need to use playback. Then I'm going to walk you through how to use my free template to program songs and to build a set with it. It's not just, hey, here's how to create a template. It's not just, hey, here's how to build a playback rig. It's everything you need to get started becoming a world-class playback engineer, and it's completely free to you. All you got to do is head to fromstudiotostage.com/template to grab that, and we will send it over to you. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you guys on the next one. Hope you have a great one, and I'm going to try to wrap up our episode 3 here. Hopefully, get through these questions, and I got to go set my stuff up. See you guys on the next one. Bye, everybody.